Hi, I am Ashley and welcome to my channel. In today's video, we are going to be doing part 2 of a series that I started back in April. And this series is all about searching for the best 2024 YA fantasy book. So in my first video, I read So Let Them Burn and Somewhere in the Deep, and you don't necessarily have to watch that video to watch this video, because in this video we're going to be reading 2 different books, and then we're going to see where those books stack up compared to all the other YA fantasy books I've read so far this year. And in my first video, I did mention that the 2 books currently that are my favorite 2024 YA fantasy books of the year so far are Tempest of Tea and Where the Dark Stands Still. And I know I said in that video that these 2 were like tied at number 1, but since that video I have decided that Where the Dark Stands Still is actually my favorite at the moment. It's just slightly above this one because I just feel like this has just ever so slightly more of the vibes that I really like with the whimsical and fairy tale like elements of this. And then since I have done that first video of this series, I've also read 2 other 2024 YA fantasy books where I have standalone vlogs for those already up on my channel if you're interested. And those are Dragon Fruit and Song of the Six Realms. This one I gave 5 stars, this one I gave 4 stars. And if you can hear a lawnmower in the background on my video right now, I apologize. It's Monday, so Monday during the springtime at my apartment is when they do all the landscaping and yard work. So I apologize for that if you can hear that right now, because I think they're right behind the room where I'm filming in. But anyways, I am going to put up a chart now that lists all of the 2024 YA fantasy releases that I've read so far this year, so you can see my ratings of them and where they all stand compared to each other. So at number 1, we have Where the Dark Stands Still, which I gave 5 stars. Number 2 is A Tempest of Tea, which I also gave 5 stars. Number 3 is Dragon Fruit, which I also gave 5 stars. A Fragile Enchantment is number 4. Also gave that 5 stars. And then number 5, Song of the Six Realms, 4 stars. Number 6, So Let Them Burn, 4 stars. Number 7, Somewhere in the Deep, 3.5 stars. But that being said, the 2 2024 YA fantasy release books I'm going to be reading in this video are going to be Heartless Hunter and The Dark Fable. And I'm very excited for both of these. So this one, I have seen a lot of people reading this lately and really loving it, which makes me even more excited to get into this. And I know this one has witches and witch hunters in it, and that it is an enemies to lovers. And then this one I haven't heard as much about. I've seen a couple people say they want to read it, but I haven't seen anyone actually read it and give their thoughts. But this one is a heist book, and our main character has the ability to turn invisible, so I feel like depending on how that is used, that could be very interesting to read about. And then also, I already kind of peeked inside this book because I was curious. And before one of the title pages, there's like this little mantra here, and it says, "We are La Fable Sombre, the dark fable. We are spirits of revolution and revenge. We are the thorn in your side, the bitter in your cup. We are the ink spilled over the stories of your tyrants." And I just read that and I was like, oh, I want to read this even more now. But that being said, I am going to start with Heartless Hunter. And also, like in my first video, we're going to have these 2 books do a little book battle and see which one I enjoy more. So I'm going to go start this, and I'll be back in a little bit with my first thoughts. Alright, I got my book, and I got my little reading buddies. And this one are my 2 newest editions. My husband got me these last month, and they're super cute, and I have like a weakness for super cute adorable plushies. And this one is like a little banana sail. And then this one is a dinosaur, and its name is Graham, because there is a whole line of these where there is one that's based off a graham cracker, and then this one right here is like the marshmallow, and then there's also another one that's like a chocolate, so it's like a whole s'mores theme going on, which is just adorable. But yeah, they are my reading buddies today, and that is my little tangent not related to reading. But now I'm gonna start my book. my gosh, so our main character, Rune, used to have a childhood crush on the love interest in this book, Gideon, who is now her enemy because he kills witches and she's a witch. But her best friend is Alex, who's his brother, and he used to tell her all these stories about Gideon before she actually met him, and so she developed a crush on him before even meeting him. So that's kind of cute. Hi, so I am back with a reading update. So I've made it to page 104, chapter 14, and I am enjoying it so far. So this book bounces back and forth between the perspectives of our two main characters. And one of those main characters is 18-year-old Rune Winters, and she is a witch. However, 2 years before the start of this story, the witch queens were killed, and since then, all witches have been hunted down and killed. And even Rune's non-blood related grandmother was also killed because she is a witch. So Rune loved her grandmother very much, and they weren't related by blood. Her grandmother took Rune in when her parents died and she had nowhere else to go. And Rune and her grandmother were gonna run away together. Then the Blood Guard, who are witch hunters, found out about their plans, and Rune's grandmother urged Rune to turn her grandmother in because her grandmother said if she didn't turn her in, then Rune would have also been killed for harboring a witch. And Rune really didn't want to turn in her grandmother, but her grandmother was like, do not make me watch them kill you. So Rune did as her grandmother said and turned her in, and ever since then she has felt guilty. So by day, Rune pretends to be just a spoiled witch girl with her only thoughts being about her social life, but at night she is the mysterious Crimson Moth and she saves other witches from being killed. Then our other main character is 20-year-old Gideon, who is a well-known and skilled witch hunter, and he along with his brother Alex were actually the ones to kill the witch queens. And also, Alex is the best friend of Rune, and he knows she is a witch, and he would never betray her. But he would also never betray his brothers, so there's that very interesting dynamic going on already between the three of them. And so Gideon has been trying to track down the Crimson Moth, and he just received some information and some evidence that points to Rune being a possible suspect. So now he is determined to get to know her so he can figure out if she actually is a Crimson Moth. And so now the two of them are starting a game of cat and mouse because Rune is also trying to get close to him as well because he has the information about a certain witch that she is trying to save. And so I'm already really liking that dynamic between Rune and Gideon. Like, it's already so much fun. Their interactions are already filled with so much tension and some banter as well. And definitely feels like a true enemies to lovers because they are actually enemies. Gideon hates witches and Rune is a witch. And also, Gideon already, even though he doesn't know that Rune is a witch, he already doesn't like her because he thinks that she's just a pretty face with an empty head. But he doesn't actually know that that's just an act that Rune puts on so that no one suspects her of being the Crimson Moth. So I think once he gets to know her, he's actually gonna like her, but then she is still a witch, so there's still that little obstacle right there. And even though I'm only 100 pages into the book, I'm already feeling an attachment between Gideon and Rune because I feel like they're already on their way to be becoming like well-developed characters. Because in the 100 pages I've already read, we have gotten some backstory on Gideon and Rune that is already starting to build them as complex, layered characters. And in addition to our two main characters, there has been the introduction of some interesting side characters as well. And one in particular is Alex, who is Rune's best friend and Gideon's younger brother. And I'm just really liking his relationship with not only Rune, but also with Gideon as well. And with Rune, he has a childhood friends relationship, but it seems like he might have romantic feelings for Rune as well. And Alex and Rune's relationship so far, just reading about it, has just been so heartwarming and cute. And I just love seeing how much they depend on each other and trust each other. And also we've already gotten glimpses into how their friendship began. And then the other minor character who I've also found intriguing so far is Verity. She is a friend of Rune's, and we've also already gotten a little bit of backstory on her as well. And so overall, I'm just really liking the characters of this book so far. I like how they already feel like real people and how they're already being established as layered, well-developed characters. And one other element of this story that I'm finding very fascinating so far is the magic system. So on chapter 1, right before the chapter starts, we have a little passage, and it actually tells you a little bit about the magic of this book, and it explains the mirage, which is the lowest and most basic category of spell. So I thought that was very interesting. And then in chapter 8, there's another one of those paragraphs, and that tells you something else about the magic system, and it tells you about what's called a menorah. So the magic system has different levels of spells, and so I'm interested in learning more about the magic system and seeing what the other levels of spells are like. And also something else that has been revealed about the magic system is after you cast a spell, there is a signature left behind. So when Rune casts a spell, she leaves a little floating crimson moth behind, and after a while it fades, but I just thought that was really cool. And so I feel like those little aspects of the magic system are already making the magic system feel unique to this book. And so those are all my thoughts for now. I'm really excited to read more and see where the story goes. Also, I just wanted to mention this little book corner, this little butterfly. So I have more of these to make. This is like a diamond painting butterfly. And I made this one to match my last read, Song of the Six Realms. But I have one that has red in it, so I think I'm going to make that one because I feel like it will match the cover of this one. Because I really like this, but I feel like it doesn't really match this cover. So I'm going to make the red one. The next thing you'll see will probably be B-roll of making one of these. And in case you're wondering, these are from Amazon. I can link them down below in case you're interested. This is actually my first time using a book corner, and I really like it. So when I went to do one of the butterfly diamond painting book corners, I realized that I don't actually have any red ones. The gems that I thought were red are actually pink, so I was a little sad about that. But then inspiration struck. So Gideon's parents were tailors, and Gideon knows how to sew. And Gideon's father used to always make fabric roses for his mother, and I just think that is super cute and sweet. And so Gideon, early on in the book, decides that he is going to hand stitch a fabric rose in order to impress Rune, which I know he has ulterior motives at the time. But I still thought that was a super cute gesture. And then a little later on in the book, Rune gets invited to this event on short notice, and she's complaining to Gideon about how she doesn't have time to get a dress made for her. And so later on, Gideon is back in his apartment, and he's like, oh, I'm going to make Rune a dress. And so he designs and sews her a dress. And I know, again, he has ulterior motives, but I was just like, that is so sweet. And so, in honor of Gideon and this book, I decided that I was going to sew a bookmark. So I just wanted to keep this super simple, so I decided to go with some leftover black fabric that I just had in my stash of fabric. And then, in order to theme it to the book, I decided I was going to paint red little moths on it. And so that was my idea. Hi, so I'm back with a reading update, and I have finished all of Heartless Hunter. I ended up loving it. It's getting 5 stars. I loved our 2 main characters, Rune and Gideon. They were just so well developed and layered characters, and they felt like real people. I especially loved Gideon. He has my heart. I just felt so bad for him, and he's been through a lot. Like, Rune has been through a lot too, but Gideon, he has been through so much, and my heart just really went out to him. And so I loved seeing the relationship between Gideon and Rune developed. I love their cat and mouse game. And I love seeing how they start off pretending to like each other, but only doing it because they want something from each other. But then those feelings slowly morph into actual true feelings. Then they start questioning each other and being like, oh my gosh, I'm still pretending, right? But then they realize that they actually are falling in love with each other. It was just so, so good. There were sweet scenes between them, there were angsty scenes between them, there were scenes where they were baring their hearts to each other, and I just loved it. And this book is definitely a true enemies to lovers, so if you are looking for a true enemies to lovers, here it is, read Heartless Hunter. And I will say that this is a YA book, and there's a steamy scene in here that kind of surprised me. And it isn't as steamy as, say, like an adult romantasy book, but it is steamy for a YA book, so just be aware of that if you decide to read this. And another thing that I really liked about this book was the magic system. So I know in my early update I talked about it a little bit, but I feel like I might not have explained it very well. So the magic system in here, in order for the witches to use magic, they have to use blood. And the fresher the blood, the easier it is to perform magic. And so more complex spells need fresher blood and more of it. And so that's why Rune only practices like small spells and not complex spells, because she uses blood that's not very fresh and she doesn't have a lot of it. And so I just found the whole magic system to be very interesting to read about. And so this book was very fast paced, and there was also a mystery element in it that kept me captivating and turning the pages. So in this book, at the beginning, Gideon talks about how witch hunters have been being killed, and clearly he can tell that it's a witch that has been doing it, and he thinks it is the Crimson Moth doing it. But we, as the readers, know that it isn't Rune's. So I was trying to guess who it was while I was reading this book, and I kind of guessed right, but I also kind of guessed wrong. So I found that was also a very fun and interesting element to the book as well. And then the ending of this book. The ending of this was so intense. I finished this and I just felt like I had been on a roller coaster after reading this. I felt so jittery and had so much energy. And also there was something at the end of this that I wasn't expecting to happen at all, and it kind of broke my heart a little bit. And so this is a duology, and the second book isn't coming out until February 2024, so that's a long wait, so that's kind of sad. But I'll definitely be reading that second one when it comes out. But overall, I loved this book. I definitely recommend this if you are a fan of romantasy, if you like reading books about witches, or if you like enemies to lovers. So next, I'm going to read The Dark Fable, and I'm hoping I will enjoy this one as well. Hi, so I am back with a reading update on The Dark Fable. I am on page 69, chapter 5. So our story follows Evie Wilder, and she is an orphan. When she was 8 years old, her father, mother, brother, and sister all died in a tragic incident, and it was reported as her father killing her mother and then killing himself, and then her 2 siblings going missing. But Evie actually believes that she saw a monster with her father's face that was the one that killed her family. And she actually did hire a private investigator too at some point, but he also couldn't really figure anything out. So after losing her family, she grew up in foster homes until she came of age. And now she lives in an attic of an apartment building, but she kind of lives there illegally because the landlord doesn't know she's there. And she has 3 jobs in order to try to make ends meet. And one of her jobs, she is a waitress for a catering company. And one night she's at her catering job, and at this particular party there's also auctions going on. And one of the things being auctioned is this Queen Cobra necklace that was apparently worn by Cleopatra. And so her evening starts off with any other at this job. She is serving rich, spoiled people, and then she ends up running into one of the people, and they spilled their drink all over her, and they don't apologize, they just walk away. So she goes in the bathroom to clean up the spill, and when she's there, this girl comes in. The girl strikes up a conversation with Evie, and Evie thinks the girl's just bored because what would a rich girl want to do with her? But the girl gives Evie her jacket she's wearing in order to cover the stain that's on her outfit. And then the girl leaves. So the girl leaves, and then Evie receives this text message on her phone that says "ready for fun," and she thinks that it's just the wrong number. So she exits the bathroom and goes back out into the party, and all chaos has broken loose. The guests are all fighting with each other. Evie sees the guy that had spilled wine on her unclasp the Cleopatra necklace that's around the lady's neck that's being auctioned. And then she gets another text, and it says, "Success equal you're the best, fail equal you go to jail." And then right after that she gets that text, he throws the necklace at her, and she catches it, and she's like, oh no, like what is going on? She panics because now she's holding this necklace, and it looks like she is a part of this crime. And so in her panic she says, "Don't see me, don't see me." And then everything around her goes kind of dark, and the colors all fade from her vision, so she's only seen in black and white, and then sounds become muted. She can still hear them, but they're kind of muted. And she also feels very cold all of a sudden, and there are people that are looking for the necklace, but they go right by her. So she doesn't really know what's going on, but she just knows she needs to get out of there, and so she runs and hides in another room. And eventually the police end up coming, and they end up asking her about what happened, and she speaks to this private investigator who is 19 years old, and his name is Jason Raw, and we learn a little bit about him. I'm like, oh, he's probably going to be important in this story in some way because they're telling us more about him than they would about minor character. But anyways, from him, she learns about this legendary group of thieves called La Sombre Fable, the Dark Fable, and she realizes that the people at the party that stole the necklace are probably part of that group. And now she has the necklace in her possession, and she doesn't really know what she's going to do with it, but she doesn't give it over to the detective because she doesn't want to be blamed as being part of this whole crime that happened. So after all this, she goes back home to her attic apartment, and then after that, she has some more encounters with the members of the Dark Fable, and eventually they end up extending her an invitation to join their group because turns out that she has this power to turn invisible, and all the members of this group have certain powers. Like, there's a girl who can fly, and then there's a boy who can create doorways. So, like, there could be a door, and then he can open the door and make it lead to, like, anywhere in the world, any real place in the world. And so she ends up joining them because she doesn't really have anything going for her in her life. Her life kind of sucks, so... And being a member of this group is obviously very dangerous, but also all the members are wearing like all designer clothes and they have a place to live. Also, Evie is really looking for a place to call home because she hasn't had one of those since she lost her family, and she's thinking that maybe with this group it will be a place to call home. And so that's about where I'm at in the story, where she has just joined the Dark Fable and is learning about them and what they do. Now for my thoughts, this is like a completely different vibe from The Crimson Moth, the book I just read, but at the same time, I'm just enjoying this a lot so far. It's just very fun right now. It is a heist story, so it is giving me Tempest of Tea vibes, and the character dialogue in this between the members of the Dark Fable reminds me a lot of the banter of the characters in A Tempest of Tea, where they're just like snarky and sarcastic and they playfully insult each other. And that's the other thing why I think I'm finding this book a lot of fun is the characters, especially the members of La Fable Sombre. They're just fun, quirky characters with their own unique personalities that really make them stand out and make you want to read more about them. And so far, this book has been very fast-paced. I don't have time to be bored yet. I just kept flipping the pages. So far, I've been reading this book really fast. I will say, though, that I was slightly confused at first about where this book took place, because I was thinking, for whatever reason, that this took place in a fantasy world. But then at the beginning, they were saying, oh, these people have British accents, and they were talking about London and other European places, and I was like, oh, are we in London or England or some other European country? But then after they started talking about New York in the metro system, and I was like, are we actually in America? I don't know, I'm so confused. But then there was actually a line that mentioned they were in California. So I was like, okay, we are in the US, we are in California, I know where we are now. So that was a little confusing at the beginning. But another thing that I am liking is the magic system. I'm just finding it very interesting how these characters have all these different powers. And also, I'm interested in more about learning about why they have these powers and where they came from. Because all the characters have sad, tragic backgrounds, and their powers manifested when they are going through these hard times. And one of the characters say that we come from the dark, which makes me wonder if there's a darker side to their magic. And our main character has mentioned in passing that she doesn't like looking into mirrors because of incidents with the Shadow Girl. So that's intriguing, and I want to know more about that. So yeah, those are all my thoughts so far on the Dark Fable. Like I said, I'm just finding this a lot of fun so far, and I'm very interested to see what happens next and where our story goes. So I'm going to read more, and once I have more thoughts, I'll be back with another update. So near the beginning of this book, Evie ends up going to the Dark Fable's hideout for the first time. And one of the characters, Mad, is just showing her around, and at some point, they end up having gingerbread and hot cocoa. And the person who made the gingerbread was Queenie, another member of the crew, and she is an alchemist, but apparently she's also just very good at cooking and baking as well. So she made them gingerbread, and that just made me want to bake gingerbread, so I made some gingerbread. And one thing I really like about this book is the characters. I like all their unique personalities, and all the dialogue between them is just so snarky, and I love it. And I'm just going to give one example of the dialogue and how fun it is. So at one point, Evie wakes up and she sees that Kyron is watching her, and she asks him, "What are you doing? Watching me sleep?" And he replies, "Mad's in the kitchen making you breakfast, and she hit me with a frying pan if she thought I was watching you sleep." So I just found that really funny. And my brain just couldn't help to think about Twilight, because I loved Twilight when I was a teenager. So there's that. And of course there's the scenes when Edward is watching Bella sleep, and now as an adult I reread Twilight in 2020, and yeah, it doesn't age well. And I see everything that is wrong with it now as an adult. And Edward watching Bella sleep is just creepy. There's no getting around that. But anyway, so that little scene just made me chuckle and reminded me of that. So I'm back for reading update. I finished the Dark Fable. It's actually been a few days since I finished this. And this book was crazy and insane, but in the best way possible. So this book had so many twists and turns. I just didn't know where things were going sometimes. And also, the characters, I didn't know who to trust at times. Because characters in this book were definitely not at first as they appeared. And some of them end up being crazy people. And the book was also a lot darker than I was expecting it to be, and that wasn't a bad thing. it just had like an ominous feeling to it like throughout the entire thing. And this is a fantasy book, but I also feel like there were some horror elements in here as well. For examples, so the thief group that Evie ends up joining, the Dark Fable, is just a small group that's a part of a larger network of thieves. They're the only group though where the members have special powers. And the two people that are in charge of this whole network of thieves are called Mother and Father. So they're Mother Night and Father Silence, and just those names sound so ominous. And so when you first meet them, they treat the Dark Fable like the members are their children. Like they're always giving them rewards for doing well, and they're always giving them praise. And Mother Night actually like teaches one of the characters how to cook, and they cook dinner together and stuff. So at first glance it seems very heartwarming, but there's also just this ominous feeling beneath the surface where on instinct that something isn't quite right, because Mother and Father are in charge of a network of thieves, and you get a scene where they punish a thief for doing something wrong. And also just sometimes the things that they say to the members of the Dark Fable have like underlining threats in them. And so there's that little element there that like adds like a dark little side to the book. And so I found that whole dynamic very interesting, also a little unsettling. So this whole book was very fast-paced and intense. There was at one point a car chase scene in this book. So at one point, the members of the Dark Fable end up doing a heist in a church, and that whole thing also gets very crazy too, because there's people trying to sabotage them, and then stuff starts going wrong with their magic powers. And that was another element of the book that I found very fascinating, was their magic powers. I like seeing everyone's different powers, and also trying to figure out just like what these powers were and where they came from. Because there's a question throughout the entirety of the book that, are these powers evil? Like, by using these powers, are the main characters losing their humanities? And one thing that did surprise me about this book, that I was expecting there to be more romance in this book, because at the beginning you have like introduction of like two characters that looked like the perfect setup for a love triangle, but that doesn't really happen. And there isn't really much romance in here at all, like teeny tiny little drops of it, but it doesn't really accumulate too much. But I think that was fine for this book. I don't think it really needed romance, because it wasn't really the focus of the book or what was important. What the book focused more on was the whole found family aspect. And I just love the found family trope, because whenever it's in a book, it just feels so heartwarming. And the ending of this book wraps everything up well, and so it feels like a standalone. But there is one paragraph at the end of the book that does leave it open a little bit. So if Arthur wanted to write a sequel, she could. But I feel very much that this book can just stand as a standalone. Like, you could just read it as standalone and it would be fine. And so I was going to give this 4 stars. But since finishing this, I just keep thinking about it. I keep thinking about how crazy it was, and the characters, and how I kind of love them all. And just this book, while it had some similar elements to things that I have read this year, like it has a heist, so that right there makes it a little bit like Tempest of Tea. The same way, it's very different from anything I've read so far this year. And since finishing this, I've also already been thinking about like all the little small details in this. Like, there's a lot to unpack in here, and some things you don't realize until after like a certain thing is already revealed, and you're like, oh yeah, now that I think about it, there was that thing that kind of hinted towards that, or that thing that completely went over my head at the time and I wasn't paying attention, and now I'm like, oh yeah, there was that little clue there. And that like right there just makes me already want to reread this. So I'm thinking I'm actually going to give this 5 stars, because of the fact that I already feel like I want to reread it, that I love the characters, and I just keep thinking about it. Like, maybe later I'll end up changing my mind again, but for now I'm going with 5 stars. I also went online to see what other people thought, and maybe that was a bad idea, because a lot of people online did not like this book. It has a lot of low ratings. There are some 5 stars people who loved it, but a lot of the ratings aren't good. I was like, oh, I'm in the minority once again for my opinions on a book. Which I know everyone's going to have a different opinion, because reading is subjective. And some of the negative criticism on this was, some people said there was just too much going on, and I do see there is a lot going on in this book, but for me, that was one of the reasons I loved it. So I'm on the opposite side of the fence with that one. And then some people said there was too much description of things, like too much description of what the characters were wearing and what they were drinking. And I was like, again, I don't mind that. It doesn't bother me. I actually liked knowing those details. So again, that doesn't take away from my enjoyment of this book. And then also some people said there were some plot lines that were kind of abandoned, and I can't remember any of those that were abandoned. So I'm like, did I miss something while I was reading this? It's possible. But at the same time, there is something that happens in here with the plot that at first it's kind of like, what just happened? Like, that doesn't make sense. But then when you think about it and go back and look at all these small details, it does make sense. So I'm like, maybe that has something to do with that. I don't know. And then also when I was looking at reviews, it seems like there could be a sequel to this coming out in the future. Because I know I mentioned there is like a little paragraph at the end here that does leave it open for a second book, but I personally feel like it doesn't need one. But we'll see what happens with that, because there are some things that could still be explored if the author really wanted to. I feel like I would kind of be interested in those, but I don't really necessarily need a sequel. I'm totally happy with this just being a standalone. So I'm giving both of these 5 stars, and my plan was to have a book battle between the two of them, but I feel like they're so different from each other that I can't really do that. Like, I love the romance in here. And this one didn't really have any romance, but it had other things that I really loved. Like, I loved the characters and the found family trope. Like, I feel like you have a little bit of found family in here, but I would say the one in here is stronger. And I'd also say, I feel like both of these had some twists and turns and some stuff that I didn't see coming. But I feel like this one had more. And then this is obviously the way it ends. I feel like just left me in a state of turmoil, whereas this one, like, it wrapped things up, so I didn't have that same feeling of turmoil. But this is also the first book in a series, so you would expect it to end like that, whereas this one feels like it's going to be a standalone. And I really like the characters in both of these, and I do feel like maybe we got to know the characters more in this one. But this one also had a bigger cast of characters, which makes it a little harder to get to know everyone. But I feel like I got to know the characters enough to feel some attachment to them in this one. And I know that was another criticism, that people said the characters weren't developed enough in this one, which I feel like we get backstory on everyone. Like, some people remain a little mysterious, but there's a certain character that remains mysterious. But I feel like that's kind of the point of his character, so that's that. But I guess I could see, like, they could be developed a little bit more, but it didn't really take away from my enjoyment of it. And I really liked the magic system in both of these. I feel like this one, though, was more logical and almost more developed, made a little bit more sense than this one. But again, it's a magic system, and I feel like the whole point of this one is trying to figure out the magic system and how it works. And in some books, I feel like the magic system doesn't have to make sense, and I feel like that's how this one worked. Again, I feel like neither of them are superior to each other, because I enjoy both the magic systems. So again, I feel like I can't really say one magic system was better than the other, because I enjoyed both of them. So all that being said, I'm just gonna say that these two tie, because I end up really enjoying and loving both of them. So that's all I have to say about these. If either of these sound interesting to you, then I would suggest checking them out. I have a feeling a lot of people have already read this one. But if this one sounds interesting to you, definitely check it out, because it is a wild ride of a book. And so with that, this video is ending. Let me know down in the comments below if you have read either of these and what you thought of them, or if you plan on reading either of them. And if you made it to this far in the video, thank you so much for watching. Until next time, bye!